There's a specific kind of person that makes everyone else nervous without ever raising their voice, without ever making threats, without ever displaying aggression. They walk into a room and the energy shifts. They speak and people listen. They remain silent and their silence carries more weight than others' words. What makes them dangerous isn't physical strength or social status or even intelligence. It's something far more rare and far more powerful. They've mastered their emotions, and in a world where everyone else is controlled by their feelings, the person who controls their own becomes untouchable. We live in an age that worships emotional expression. We're told to feel our feelings, to be authentic, to let it all out. And there's truth in emotional awareness, in not suppressing what we experience. But we've confused awareness with obedience. We've mistaken feeling emotions with being controlled by them. We've created a culture where emotional reactivity is celebrated as authenticity and emotional mastery is criticized as repression. And this confusion has left most people as slaves to their own internal weather, blown about by every mood, every trigger, every passing feeling. The ancient Stoics understood something our culture has forgotten. Emotions are not commands. They're information. They arise in you, yes, but you are not them and they are not you. Between the emotion and your response to it, there's a space. And in that space lives your power. The person who's mastered their emotions hasn't eliminated feeling. They've eliminated the automatic obedience to feeling. They feel anger without becoming angry. They experience fear without becoming afraid. They notice desire without becoming desperate. And this mastery, this capacity to feel fully while remaining sovereign over action, this is what makes them dangerous. Marcus Aurelius commanded the most powerful military force in the ancient world. Yet in his private writings, he revealed his true battlefield. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Not power over his enemies. Not power over his circumstances. Power over his mind, because he understood that the emperor controlled by his emotions is more enslaved than the prisoner who's mastered his. External power means nothing if you're tyrannized from within. Think about your own life. How many decisions have you made in the grip of emotion that you later regretted? How many words have you spoken in anger that you can't take back? How many opportunities have you missed because fear controlled your response? How many relationships have you damaged because you reacted instead of responded? Your emotions aren't the problem. Your obedience to them is. Here's what happens when you're controlled by your emotions. Someone disrespects you and anger floods your system. You react immediately, defending yourself, attacking back, escalating the situation. Later, after the adrenaline fades, you realize your reaction made things worse. But in the moment, you had no choice because you've never developed the capacity to feel anger without obeying it. The emotion arose and you automatically followed its command. Or consider fear. An opportunity appears that could change your life. But it's risky, uncertain, outside your comfort zone. Fear arises, which is natural and appropriate. But instead of feeling the fear and acting anyway, you obey the fear. You let it make the decision. You stay safe, stay small, stay stuck. And you tell yourself you're being rational, being careful, being smart. But really, you're being controlled. The Stoics weren't advocating for becoming emotionless. Seneca made this clear when he said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Notice he didn't say don't suffer. He said don't suffer unnecessarily. Don't add suffering through poor timing, through imagination, through obedience to emotions that aren't serving you. Suffer when suffering is appropriate, but don't let suffering control you beyond its natural bounds. This distinction is everything. The person who hasn't mastered their emotions experiences anger and becomes angry. The person who has mastered their emotions experiences anger and observes it. Ah, there's anger. Interesting. What's it trying to tell me? Is action warranted? If so, what action serves my values rather than merely releasing this feeling? Same emotion, completely different relationship to it. Before we go deeper, I need you to understand something. If you're still here, if this concept of emotional mastery resonates with you, you're already different from most people. Most will hear this and think it sounds good but never practice it. They'll continue being controlled by every feeling that arises, living reactively instead of responsively. But you, if you subscribe to this channel and commit to this path, you're choosing to become dangerous in the most powerful way possible. Dangerous because you cannot be manipulated through your emotions. Dangerous because you cannot be provoked into poor decisions. Dangerous because you've found the one source of power that external circumstances cannot touch. Join this community of people mastering themselves. Epictetus, who lived as a slave, understood emotional mastery at a level most free people never reach. His body was owned by another, but his mind remained his own. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But we need to understand the depth of what he meant. He's not saying emotions don't matter. He's saying your reaction to your emotions, your relationship with them, determines your experience more than the emotions themselves. His master could beat him. That would naturally produce pain, fear, anger. But Epictetus maintained the capacity to feel those emotions without letting them control his inner state. The pain was real, the fear was real, the anger was real, but he remained himself through it all. He didn't dissociate or suppress. He felt fully while remaining sovereign over his responses. That's mastery. That's what made him more free in chains than most people are with unlimited external freedom. Now, you're probably thinking, but isn't it healthy to express emotions? Isn't suppressing them harmful? And this reveals the fundamental misunderstanding we need to clear up. There's a massive difference between suppression and mastery. Suppression is pushing emotions down, pretending they're not there, denying what you feel. That is unhealthy. That does create problems. But mastery is something entirely different. Mastery is feeling the emotion fully, acknowledging it completely, and then choosing your response consciously rather than automatically. When you suppress anger, you pretend you're not angry while the anger poisons you from within. When you master anger, you say, "I'm feeling intense anger right now. I'm going to feel this completely. And then I'm going to choose how to respond in a way that serves my values rather than just releases this feeling." The person who suppresses ends up exploding eventually because the pressure builds. The person who reacts creates chaos because they're controlled by the feeling. The person who masters remains calm because they've learned to hold emotion without being held by it. They've developed what the Stoics called apatheia, which doesn't mean apathy or not caring. It means not being subject to destructive passions. It means emotional wisdom rather than emotional slavery. Here's the brutal truth about why most people never develop this mastery. It's uncomfortable. It requires you to sit with intense feelings without immediately acting to relieve them. It demands that you create space between stimulus and response, and that space can feel excruciating. It's so much easier to just react, to follow the emotion wherever it leads, to let yourself be swept away by the feeling. Mastery requires strength. Reaction requires nothing. But consider the cost of that easy path. How many relationships have you damaged through emotional reactivity? How many opportunities have you lost through fear-based decisions? How much respect have you forfeited by letting others see they can manipulate you through your emotions? How much power have you given away to anyone who knows which buttons to push? The dangerous person, the one everyone instinctively respects even if they can't articulate why, is the person who cannot be emotionally manipulated. You insult them and they don't react defensively. You threaten them and they don't respond with fear. You try to provoke them and they remain unmoved. Not because they don't feel the emotions, but because they've mastered the space between feeling and action. And that mastery creates a presence that others can sense even if they don't understand it. Let me show you what emotional mastery actually looks like in the moments that matter. Someone attacks your character publicly. They lie about you, misrepresent you, try to damage your reputation. The emotion that arises is immediate and intense: rage, indignation, the burning need to defend yourself, to attack back, to make them pay for what they've said. This is natural. This is human. The question is, what happens next? The person without mastery obeys the emotion immediately. They lash out. They engage. They try to prove the attacker wrong, which only gives the attack more energy and attention. They damage their own credibility through the intensity of their reaction. They let the attacker control their emotional state, their actions, their peace. And even if they win the argument, they've lost something more important. They've demonstrated that they can be provoked. They've shown everyone watching that their emotions can be weaponized against them. The person with mastery feels the same rage, the same indignation, the same urge to strike back. But they don't obey it. They notice it. There's intense anger. There's the desire for revenge. There's fear about what others will think. They feel it all fully. And then they ask, what response serves my character? What action aligns with my values? What would wisdom do here? Maybe they respond with a brief, calm correction. Maybe they say nothing at all, letting the attack reveal more about the attacker than about them. But whatever they do, it's chosen consciously, not driven compulsively by emotion. See the difference? Same emotion, same intensity, completely different relationship to it. One person is controlled by the feeling. The other person feels the feeling while remaining in control of themselves. And everyone watching can sense this difference even if they can't name it. They see someone who can be provoked versus someone who cannot. Someone who's reactive versus someone who's responsive. Someone who's weak versus someone who's dangerous. Marcus Aurelius faced this constantly. As emperor, he was criticized, attacked, undermined, betrayed. People questioned his decisions, challenged his authority, spread rumors about him. And he had the power to crush anyone who opposed him. The emotion to do so surely arose. Anger at the injustice, indignation at the disrespect, fear about his position. But his meditations show how he handled these emotions. Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. He's not denying that attacks happen. He's not pretending insults don't sting. He's recognizing that the harm lives not in the event but in his interpretation of it and his emotional response to it. He can feel the initial emotional reaction and then choose whether to be harmed by it. That's mastery. That's power. That's what made him dangerous despite appearing gentle. Now let's explore the mechanics of how this mastery actually develops, because it's not something you just decide to do. It's a practice, a training, a gradual strengthening of your capacity to hold emotion without being held by it. The Stoics gave us a specific method, and modern neuroscience has confirmed its effectiveness. It starts with awareness. Most people are so identified with their emotions that they don't distinguish between feeling and being. They don't say, I'm feeling angry. They say, I am angry. They don't say, I'm experiencing fear. They say, I am afraid. This linguistic difference reveals a psychological reality. When you are the emotion, you have no choice but to obey it. When you feel the emotion, you create the space for choice. The first practice is simply labeling. When an emotion arises, name it specifically. Not, I'm upset, but I'm feeling a combination of anger at being disrespected, fear about losing status, and sadness that this relationship is damaged. The more precisely you can identify what you're feeling, the less the emotion controls you. Because precision requires observation, and observation creates distance, and distance creates choice. Seneca practiced this daily. He would review his day each evening, examining moments when emotions arose and how he handled them. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. Here's where I felt anger. Here's what I did with it. Did that serve me? What would wisdom have done differently? This practice trains your awareness. You start noticing emotions earlier in their progression, before they've built to overwhelming intensity. The second practice is the pause. Between the emotion arising and your response, insert a deliberate pause. Just 3 seconds. Breathe. Notice the feeling in your body. Acknowledge what's present. I'm feeling intense anxiety right now. And then ask, what does my character require here? What would my best self do? 3 seconds doesn't sound like much, but in those 3 seconds, you reclaim sovereignty. You interrupt the automatic reaction. You create space for wisdom to enter. Epictetus taught his students to practice this pause with progressively more challenging situations. Start with minor annoyances. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Feel the irritation. Pause. Choose your response. Don't let the irritation choose for you. Then build to bigger challenges. Someone insults you. Feel the anger. Pause. Choose your response. Eventually, you develop the capacity to pause even in the most emotionally intense situations. The third practice is what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Before you enter a potentially emotional situation, imagine the worst outcomes. Visualize yourself experiencing intense emotion and maintaining your composure anyway. This isn't pessimism. This is preparation. You're training your nervous system that you can feel intensely and still choose wisely. Marcus did this before every major decision, every difficult conversation, every potential conflict. He would imagine the emotions that might arise, the provocations he might face, the fears that might emerge. And he would practice his response in his mind first. When they criticize me, I will feel anger. I will notice the anger. I will not obey the anger. I will respond according to reason, not emotion. By the time the actual situation occurred, he'd already rehearsed mastery. Here's what starts to happen as you practice these 3 things consistently. Labeling emotions precisely, pausing before responding, and pre-experiencing challenging situations. Your relationship to emotion fundamentally shifts. Emotions stop being these overwhelming forces that take you over and become more like weather patterns you can observe. Ah, there's a storm of anger moving through. Intense, but temporary. I can feel this without being destroyed by it. And as your relationship to emotion shifts, something else happens. You become harder to manipulate. Because manipulation works by triggering emotional reactions that bypass rational thought. The marketer triggers your fear of missing out so you buy impulsively. The toxic person triggers your guilt so you violate your boundaries. The opponent triggers your anger so you lose composure. But when you've mastered your emotions, when you can feel the fear or guilt or anger without obeying it, you become immune to these tactics. This is why emotional mastery makes you dangerous. Not because you're going to hurt anyone, but because you cannot be controlled. The person who can push your buttons has power over you. The person who can provoke you into poor decisions has power over you. The person who can make you react emotionally has power over you. But when no one can push your buttons because you've mastered your response to the push, when no one can provoke you because you've learned to feel provocation without obeying it, you've become untouchable. Halfway through this journey into emotional mastery, I want you to consider something. The reason you're still here, still engaged with this material, is because you've experienced the cost of emotional reactivity. You've said things you regret. You've made decisions driven by fear. You've damaged relationships through uncontrolled anger. And you're ready for a different way. Subscribe to this channel and commit to the path of mastery. We're building a community of people who refuse to be controlled by their emotions or by those who would manipulate those emotions. Join us in becoming dangerous through discipline. Now we need to address the deeper question. Why do emotions control us so easily? Why is mastery so rare? The answer lies in understanding what emotions actually are and why they evolved. Emotions are ancient survival mechanisms. Fear kept your ancestors alive by triggering fight or flight when predators appeared. Anger mobilized energy to defend against threats. Anxiety motivated preparation for future challenges. These emotions served crucial functions in environments where immediate reaction meant survival. But here's the problem. Your emotional systems evolved for a world that no longer exists. You're walking around with a nervous system designed for life or death situations that you rarely actually face. Your boss criticizes you and your body responds as if you're being attacked by a predator. Someone disrespects you online and your system mobilizes for physical combat. You face a financial setback and your brain treats it like starvation is imminent. The emotion is real, the physiological response is real, but it's massively disproportionate to the actual threat. This is why emotional reactions so often make things worse. Your emotions are giving you survival information for a different context. They're screaming, fight or flee, when the wise response is, pause and respond strategically. They're demanding immediate action when patience would serve you better. They're focusing you on short-term relief when long-term well-being requires short-term discomfort. The Stoics understood this mismatch even without modern neuroscience. They recognized that emotional impulses often mislead. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of things." He meant that the external event triggers the emotion, yes, but the intensity and duration of the emotion come from how you interpret the event. Your boss's criticism triggers discomfort. Your interpretation, "This means I'm incompetent, I'm going to be fired, my career is over," creates the overwhelming anxiety. When you understand this, you realize that mastering your emotions isn't about fighting against nature. It's about updating your interpretations to match current reality rather than ancient threat patterns. Yes, your boss criticized you, but you're not actually in danger. Your survival isn't threatened. Your worth isn't determined by this feedback. This is information you can use, not a threat you need to fight or flee from. Here's a framework the Stoics used that transforms how you relate to emotions. They distinguished between initial reactions and extended responses. The initial reaction, what they called the first movement, is involuntary. Someone insults you and you feel the flash of anger. You can't control that. It's automatic, hardwired, part of being human. But what you do after that first movement, that's entirely within your control. The person without mastery experiences the first movement of anger and then feeds it. They rehearse the insult. They imagine responses. They build narratives about what it means. They work themselves into greater anger until the initial flash has become a raging fire. The person with mastery experiences the same first movement but doesn't feed it. They notice it, they feel it, and then they let it pass like a wave, without adding fuel to keep it burning. Marcus wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Read that carefully. At any moment, you can revoke your estimate. You can change your interpretation. You can choose to see the situation differently. This is your power. Not power over what happens, but power over what it means. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. You send a vulnerable message to someone you care about. They don't respond. Hours pass. A day passes. Anxiety builds. What's happening in your mind? You're creating interpretations. They're angry with me. They don't care. They're pulling away. I said something wrong. Each interpretation triggers more emotion. The anxiety builds. You're suffering, not from their silence, but from your interpretations of their silence. Now apply Stoic mastery. The external fact: they haven't responded. The first movement: anxiety arises. That's natural. But then, instead of feeding it with interpretations, you practice what Marcus taught. I don't know why they haven't responded. I cannot control their response time. I can control my interpretation. I choose to interpret this neutrally. They're busy. They'll respond when they can. Or they won't. Either way, my peace doesn't depend on their response timing. Same situation. Same initial anxiety. Completely different relationship to it. One path leads to hours or days of suffering. The other path leads to feeling the anxiety, acknowledging it, and choosing peace anyway. That's mastery. That's power. That's what makes you dangerous, because no external circumstance can destroy your inner state if you maintain sovereignty over interpretation. But let's go even deeper into what makes emotional mastery truly dangerous. When you've mastered your emotions, you develop several capacities that give you enormous advantage in any situation. First, clarity. While everyone else is clouded by emotional reaction, you're seeing clearly. You're processing information accurately. You're making decisions based on reality rather than fear or anger or desire. Second, patience. Emotional reactivity demands immediate action, immediate relief, immediate response. Mastery allows you to wait, to observe, to let situations develop, to act when the time is right rather than when the emotion is strong. And patience is power, because timing is everything. The reaction that would escalate a situation in the moment might resolve it completely if delayed. Third, influence. When you're not controlled by emotions, you can observe others' emotions clearly. You can see when someone is operating from fear, from anger, from insecurity. And with that clarity, you can choose how to respond in ways that serve the situation rather than just react to their emotional state. You become a stabilizing presence. People are drawn to you because you provide something rare: emotional reliability. Seneca observed this in great leaders throughout history. The ones who endured, who maintained power through crisis, who commanded genuine respect, they all shared this quality. They could feel intense emotion without being controlled by it. They could face fear without becoming paralyzed. They could experience anger without lashing out. They could hold desire without becoming desperate. And this emotional sovereignty made them dangerous in the best sense. Here's what emotional mastery looks like in practice across different domains of life. In relationships, it means you can have difficult conversations without becoming defensive. You can hear criticism without immediately justifying yourself. You can feel hurt without punishing the other person. You can experience conflict without needing to win. This makes you someone others can actually communicate with instead of just someone they need to manage emotionally. In work, it means you can receive feedback without your ego distorting it. You can face setbacks without catastrophizing. You can pursue opportunities without desperation. You can negotiate without fear weakening your position. This makes you formidable because you're operating from clarity while others are operating from emotion. In confrontation, it means you cannot be provoked. Someone tries to bait you into reaction and you simply don't take the bait. You feel the pull, you notice the emotion, and you choose your response. This is devastatingly effective because the person trying to manipulate you through emotion realizes their tactic doesn't work. You've just demonstrated that you're playing a different game than they are. The Stoics had a practice specifically for developing this unshakable quality. They would intentionally place themselves in situations that triggered emotion and practice maintaining composure. Epictetus had his students practice being insulted without reacting. Marcus would deliberately engage with difficult people to strengthen his patience. Seneca would periodically lie simply to reduce his attachment to luxury. They weren't avoiding emotion. They were training themselves to feel it without being controlled by it. Let me give you the complete framework for developing this mastery, the practices that will transform you from someone controlled by emotions to someone who commands them. This isn't theory. This is the actual training protocol the Stoics used, validated by modern psychology, ready for you to implement immediately. Practice 1. The morning preparation. Before your day begins, before you encounter any emotional triggers, spend 5 minutes preparing your mind. Remind yourself, today I will experience emotions. Anger, fear, desire, frustration, anxiety. These are natural. These are information. But these are not commands. I will feel them fully and choose my responses consciously. This primes your awareness so you're not caught off guard when emotions arise. Then, anticipate specific challenges. I have that difficult meeting. I may feel defensive if criticized. I will notice the defensiveness. I will pause. I will respond from wisdom, not from wounded ego. By preparing your mind for specific emotional challenges, you're less likely to be swept away when they occur. Practice 2. The labeling discipline. Throughout your day, whenever an emotion arises, label it precisely and specifically. Not, I feel bad, but I'm experiencing anxiety about this deadline combined with frustration that I'm behind and fear that I'll disappoint people. The more precisely you can name what you're feeling, the more distance you create from the feeling. Distance creates choice. Make this a continuous practice. Every emotion, every feeling tone, label it. There's irritation. There's excitement. There's worry. There's impatience. This continuous labeling trains your observer mind, the part of you that can witness emotion without being consumed by it. Over time, this observer becomes stronger, more stable, more reliable. Practice 3. The 3-second pause. This is your circuit breaker for emotional reactivity. When an emotion arises with intensity, when you feel the urge to react immediately, pause for 3 conscious breaths. Just 3. Count them. Feel them. During these 3 breaths, notice the emotion in your body. Where do you feel it? What sensations are present? And then ask, what would wisdom do here? 3 seconds interrupts the automatic reaction. It creates space for conscious choice. And in situations where you're practicing mastery, those 3 seconds are the difference between reaction and response, between being controlled and maintaining control. Practice 4. The evening review. At the end of each day, examine your emotional experiences without judgment. Here's where I felt anger and I reacted poorly. What triggered it? What could I have done differently? Here's where I felt fear and I mastered it. What supported that mastery? How can I strengthen it? This isn't about beating yourself up for failures. It's about learning from each day's experiments in mastery. Marcus Aurelius did this nightly. He would review his actions, his responses, his emotional experiences. He would note where he succeeded in maintaining his character and where he fell short. And this daily review created continuous improvement. Each day built on the last. Each challenge taught him something about his own patterns. Practice 5. The voluntary discomfort. Once a week, deliberately place yourself in a mildly uncomfortable situation specifically to practice emotional mastery. Have a conversation you've been avoiding. Do something that makes you anxious. Face a fear that's been limiting you. The point isn't the outcome of the situation. The point is practicing feeling intense emotion while maintaining composure. Start small. If public speaking terrifies you, practice speaking up in a meeting. If confrontation makes you anxious, practice setting a small boundary. Build your capacity gradually. This is how you develop confidence in your ability to feel anything without being destroyed by it. Practice 6. The interpretation flexibility. When something disturbs you, practice generating multiple interpretations. Your first interpretation is usually the one that creates the most suffering. They didn't invite me because they don't like me. That interpretation triggers hurt and anger. But what else could it mean? They forgot. They assumed I was busy. They wanted a smaller gathering. This has nothing to do with me. You don't need to believe the alternative interpretations. You just need to recognize that your first interpretation isn't fact, it's one possibility among many. This flexibility weakens the emotion's grip because you've reminded yourself that you don't actually know what something means until you've verified it. Practice 7. The physical reset. Emotions live in your body as much as your mind. When you're overwhelmed by an emotion, change your physical state. If you're sitting, stand. If you're inside, go outside. If you're still, move. Physical movement interrupts emotional patterns. Combine this with deliberate breathing. 5 deep breaths, focusing entirely on the sensation of breathing. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, calming the fight or flight response. The Stoics understood the mind-body connection. They knew that changing your physical state changes your mental state. Use this. When emotion threatens to overwhelm you, move your body. Change your position. Breathe consciously. Give yourself a physical reset that creates space for mastery. Now, let's talk about what happens as you practice these 7 disciplines consistently. The first change you'll notice is that your emotional baseline stabilizes. You'll still feel emotions, possibly even more intensely because you're not suppressing them. But you'll swing less wildly. You'll return to center faster. You'll maintain your equilibrium through situations that would have previously destabilized you for hours or days. The second change is that you'll develop emotional anticipation. You'll start noticing patterns. When I'm tired, I'm more irritable. When I'm hungry, I'm less patient. When I'm stressed, I'm more reactive. This awareness allows you to prepare. You can adjust your expectations, give yourself more grace, avoid difficult conversations when you're not at your best. The third change is that others will respond to you differently. They'll sense that you cannot be easily provoked, manipulated, or destabilized. Some people will respect this and engage with you more authentically. Others, particularly those who rely on emotional manipulation, will become frustrated with you and may distance themselves. Both outcomes are positive. You're attracting alignment and repelling manipulation. The fourth change is the most profound. You'll discover a deep, unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. Because you've proven to yourself that you can feel any emotion without being destroyed by it, you stop fearing your own emotional experiences. And when you stop fearing your emotions, you stop trying to control external circumstances to avoid triggering them. You become free. This is what the Stoics meant by apatheia. Not apathy, not numbness, not coldness, but freedom from being enslaved by passion. The capacity to feel deeply while remaining sovereign over action. The ability to experience the full range of human emotion while maintaining your character through all of it. Marcus Aurelius, facing plague, war, betrayal, and personal loss, maintained this freedom. Epictetus, living in slavery, developed this sovereignty. Seneca, stripped of status and eventually ordered to end his own life, demonstrated this mastery until his last breath. They proved that emotional mastery is possible regardless of circumstances. They proved that this mastery is what makes you truly dangerous, truly free, truly untouchable. As we close this exploration, I want you to understand what you're choosing if you commit to this path. You're choosing to become someone who cannot be controlled through their emotions. You're choosing to develop a presence that others can sense even if they can't name. You're choosing to become dangerous not because you'll harm anyone, but because you cannot be harmed by anyone who tries to manipulate you through fear, anger, guilt, or desire. This is rare. This is difficult. This requires daily practice, continuous awareness, honest self-examination. But the reward is worth every moment of discomfort. The reward is becoming someone who moves through the world with unshakable composure. Someone who feels deeply but acts wisely. Someone who cannot be provoked, cannot be manipulated, cannot be destabilized by external circumstances. Subscribe to this channel and walk this path with us. We're building a community of people committed to mastering themselves, to developing the emotional sovereignty that makes you truly free. The practices are here. The path is clear. Now you just need the commitment to walk it. You become dangerous when you master your emotions. Not dangerous in the sense of harm, but dangerous in the sense of power that cannot be taken from you. Dangerous because you've found the one territory where you have complete sovereignty. Your own mind, your own responses, your own interpretation of events. Dangerous because while everyone else is blown about by their feelings, you remain centered, clear, composed. Master your emotions. Command your responses. Develop the unshakable presence that comes from knowing you can feel anything without being destroyed by it. This is the Stoic power revealed. This is your path to becoming truly dangerous. Walk it with discipline, with commitment, with the understanding that freedom is found not in controlling circumstances but in mastering yourself. The world will try to provoke you. Life will trigger your emotions. People will attempt to manipulate you through fear or anger or desire. And you'll feel all of it. But you won't obey it. You'll feel, you'll observe, and you'll choose. And in that choosing, in that space between feeling and action, you'll discover a power most people never know exists. This is mastery. This is freedom. This is what makes you dangerous. Now go practice it.